Hi, it's Jenny Flies of Polyp, and I got Dad here with me today. And lately, the videos we've been talking about, we've lost Mom, and you can look at previous videos that talk more about that. But we thought before we donated Mom's ostomy supplies, we would do a video about her supplies and the changing process that Mom used and things like that. So, Dad, do you want to share what you were sharing with me?
Okay. Nina was in the hospital and, had her surgery. The ET nurses, changed her appliance and gave us demonstrations on what to do. And so when we got home, we had to start doing it ourselves. And they made sure that they emphasized the fact that it was important for Anna to be able to change her appliance herself, and which did prove to be valuable because she had failures when she was by herself, or she was out in public and had failures and she had to go somewhere and change it by herself. So that was important. But most of the time when we were at home and we were doing a planned change of appliance, I was with her and I was assisting her. Her typical life cycle with an appliance with her type of ostomy was about 3 days. She occasionally would get 4 days and very occasionally would get 5 days. She also had a single day or a 2-day occurrence that happened more frequently than we would have liked. So what we would do, she would typically start changing it for whatever reason. She made those decisions herself, but she lots of times she would start changing it at 9 o'clock at night. I didn't like to change it any later than that because I had to work the next day most of the time, unless it happened to be on a weekend. So what she would do, she had a recliner in the bedroom that she would sit in, and she would lean it back slightly, and she would start with using a solvent to remove her appliance. She always used tape in addition to the way that it came to hopefully secure it better. So she would use a solvent. She typically used one that's called Unisolve to remove the appliance, and she might save the fasteners or the clamps for the bag, but she would throw everything else away. Then she would start cleaning it up, and at a certain point in this cycle, she would have me get her a basin of hot water, and she would use soap and a washcloth to wash her stomach and the area around the stoma. And she used, what's the soap that doesn't leave a film?
Is it Dove?
No.
Or, honestly, I can't remember. I don't remember what soap we use. This is the
Ivory.
Same. Oh, Ivory. Okay.
Ivory.
Okay,
I always
soap.
have a problem for some reason remembering that, but it's Ivory. She used Ivory soap, and it would last a long time, so I didn't see her buy it very often to wash the area around the stoma.
And this was bar soap.
Yeah, it's a bar soap.
It's bar soap, Ivory bar soap.
So she would use a washcloth. She would have this container of hot water, which you typically get pretty cold by the time she was finished, because remember, she had an ileostomy, so she had pretty much continuous output. And since we typically changed at nighttime, well, she had eaten dinner at 6 or 7 or 5 or whatever the time was. Well, she might still be having output, pretty steady output at 9 o'clock at night.
And it's important also, Mom had short bowel syndrome and dumping syndrome, which also contributed to the increased frequency.
Right, so typically what her output was like diarrhea.
which is common for ileostomies, but with the other two conditions, it would make it more frequent even, and even it exasperates.
Right. So when she got to the point where she thought that she had cleaned everything up as well as she could, and she thought her output was slow enough or infrequent enough that we could get the appliance put together and put on, she would tell me, and I would do the part about assembling the appliance that we needed to put on. We used the two-piece. We used the convex type wafer, and then we had a bag that you snapped on top of that, and then you used clamps to close the bottom of the bag. So since her stoma didn't protrude past her surface of her stomach, we used an Ekin wafer, which is just a round wafer of.
It was an adhesive, but it's not the same as the glue paste. And I liked the Ekin because it didn't burn my skin. If my skin was raw, the glue paste would.
And typically, before she would have me place the wafer on her, around her stomach, onto her stomach, she would use a barrier. She would wipe a barrier on like skin prep, and there's different brands, and she had several.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them you would open it up and use just like a little cloth thing that was
like a towelette.
Yeah, a towelette, and should wipe it on. Some of them you could have a container with a roll top, and you could roll them on.
I know there's a spray option too.
And I don't recall ever using the spray option. Mm-hmm. And then right before I would do my portion to put the wafer on her stomach, she would use a powder around the stoma, mm-hmm. because it typically would weep a little bit, and the powder would absorb that, and give a better chance to adhere. And also around the opening in the appliance, I would put Caraya paste, because she felt like that would give her another barrier to prolong the life, because the output from ileostomy, and especially in her case, is kind of hot and acidic, so it would like melt.
Yeah, over time. Well, and so to back up though, so because the Ekin is moldable, and you don't have to use the whole thing; it's a ring, and we should have some in the supplies we're going to go through. But you don't have to use the whole thing; you can use parts. But so she would put the powder on first, use the stoma powder
on her
before
stomach,
the Ekin, right? And we use
the Ekin was already attached to the appliance,
to the wafer itself,
and it already had this Caraya paste put around the opening.
And we would use a blow dryer to remove the excess stoma powder.
Right, and to dry her skin to make sure it was dry. And then she would recline further in the recliner, so she was not in a flat position, but she was reclined quite a bit, and then I would come over and place the appliance on her stomach, press it down. I might even use the tip of a scissors to press around the opening in the appliance.
And are you talking about this tip or this tip?
Yeah, this tip here.
Oh, you would, okay.
Around the opening, okay. to get pressure.
But not
to hopefully make it adhere better.
Yeah.
And then once that was done, the appliance has an adhesive.
A paper tape.
Yeah, that's part of it. So you take the backing off of that, and that would stick to her stomach. And then at that point, I'd put the bag on, snap that on, make sure that it is fully snapped on, because it's you
Sometimes
think
it
it's
is.
got it, you've got it fastened securely, but you don't, and it might pop off later. And she's had all types of accidents like that, so I always looked, and then I would press down that assembled appliance package, press down to try to get that adhere to her stomach, to her skin. Then she would close it, and then in the last several years we used an adhesive strip that's about yay long,
Is that the Bravo strip?
a Bravo strip, and real sticky. And I would use that on each side of the appliance on top of the
Wafer, or the paper.
yeah, the
That's
paper
right,
tape, and on, part of it on the tape and part of it on her skin to give her another.
Added protection there. And
And then she would put tape on top of all that.
well, and then also we would, because Mom taught me to do it the same way in a lot of ways, the same steps. And so we would also hold our hand over it to the heat of our
Yeah.
hand. And we would do that for about 5 minutes, it seemed like.
Well, sometimes she'd just go to sleep.
Well, I think sometimes didn't we also use the blow dryer to add heat, or just
She
our
may
hands?
have, but she didn't
I
typically.
can't remember. I only had an ileostomy for 6 years, so it was from age 9 to 15. Whereas Mom, she had one for 39 years. 39 years.
Yeah, 39 years. And since she averaged about 3 days a appliance, that means that she changed that probably somewhere between 4,500 and 5,000 times over
That
that 39 years. And I was present
most of the time.
most of the time. So over 4,000 times I was present helping her. I do not remember her being at home when I was there that I did not help her.
Right, because you had your tasks assigned, and these were also, if you weren't there and I was there, then these were my tasks to help Mom. And
then if we were neither of us was there, she just did it herself. But she had problems seeing, since her stoma didn't protrude. To get it centered and placed correctly was difficult. And she would use a mirror and she would stand up to try to do it. But those things are iffy. And she didn't get very good life out of doing it herself, so she didn't make a habit of doing that if she had an option. Now, when we were out of town or something and she had a problem, we would typically try to find a bathroom somewhere, either in somebody's house that we were staying with or visiting, or in a filling station or whatever, where we could go to get some privacy, and we'd change it. And those were not good experiences. And, Jenny helped her a few times when we were all three together, or when they were by themselves and I wasn't with them.
Well, and we also, you had made a point too that when you're learning how to change it in the hospital, you're laying flat on a bed where that's not, unless you're standing up, which that is an option that some people do. But like us, we typically sat, whether we were in the bed, like in the hotel, but it's a different position that you're in.
Yeah, it wasn't, things were different in a motel.
Well,
and lots of times we didn't get as good life when we were on vacation for whatever reason as we did at home.
Well, and even the recliner's a different position.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think too, if you stand up, you're still it's different because the gravity is going to be different on your skin versus laying down flat. So it's going to be something that you have to adapt to from how you learn to do it in the hospital.
And remember that this went in, for close to 40 years. Well, part of that time, the first few years after she had her surgery and had an ileostomy, she was pretty heavy. So she had a large.
She had a belly apron.
She had,
It was a large belly apron.
And then, but after a few years, well, she lost quite a bit of weight, so she had a saggy belly,
which made it hard too. And
right. Not only that, but she had she had at least two major surgeries that left some pretty massive scars along her stomach. And so where her belly button would normally been was a deep cavity.
Yeah, it was the weirdest looking one because it
And
was oblong like this,
Mhm.
and it was to the side. It was I've never seen something like that on someone else.
And so that was relatively close to the stoma. So that caused stresses on that side of the stoma, and that's typically where it would lift up and it would leak.
Yeah.
And but sometimes when it leaked, it just wasn't stuck anywhere very good, and it would start leaking. And sometimes it just fell off. I guess she had it where it just popped off.
Goodness. Well, I know.
And had a massive leak.
Well, she had a lot of different things that's not typical, really, of the ostomy experience. As far as, I mean, her stoma was very flush. Most, like you said, protrude. One thing that we always did too on both of ours is we would date it. We would write with an ink pen on the wafer, paper wafer, the date that we'd done it, so we could help keep track.
Yeah, because she tried to have a schedule. What I mean is, if it was the third day and she thought maybe it would not last another day, then she needed to know it was the third day,
or if,
so
like,
she could change it.
If we have things going.
Her social life, or we were traveling, or she needed to schedule this change, and we had to pick a time and a place that would work.
Yeah.
Because we really didn't want to do it unplanned. Those were not good experiences. Don't recommend that at all, no matter what type of ostomy you have. I don't think they are fun.
No, and I would say though, I think the majority of the time though, Mom didn't really have a large leak cycle. I mean, as far as she went into cycles, and I had this cycle too, where we would have like daily changes. But I think those were less frequent when going those cycles versus we could make it to probably that third day.
Yeah. Now, if we traveled, we always took a fair amount of supplies.
Extra supplies.
Because we never knew exactly what was going to happen. And I know we were visiting relatives one time, and she started a cycle where she would change the appliance, and then the next evening we would need to change it again. It would last 24 hours, and it would need to be changed. So if she hadn't had 4 or 5 extra beyond what she thought she would need, she would have ran out, and then we would have had to find a local place to buy supplies.
And I remember that on one of our trips, she was in a cycle like that, and we were concerned about running out of supplies. And so I remember looking at places like, we looked at the UAA support groups, because they often have ostomy closets, or even just an ostomy local supply, medical supply place. And I remember we didn't have to end up doing that, but we were concerned about it, and so we were prepared to be like, okay, let's go tomorrow and get one supply at least. And I'm going to link, though, like I said, we're going to donate Mom's supplies. So if someone has extra supplies that they no longer need, whether it's reversal or, in Mom's case, unfortunately, death, or if you change supply types, because we did that too, we would have to change different supply brands and types like that. And so I will link a list of places that you can donate, and also these are also places that they accept donations and provide donations to people that are needing ostomy supplies, because unfortunately it is quite expensive without insurance coverage. And you'll see the box that we have, Mom became on Medicare, and so she got quite a bit more supplies than she needed versus when it was not Medicare.
Yeah, and speaking of insurance, when after she had her initial surgery and was dealing with the ileostomy and buying supplies, we started out ordering them through a pharmacy, a local pharmacy, and then we'd have to go down and pick them up and do our copay. And our copay was like 20% at that time. Of course, back 40 years ago, they were cheaper than they are now. But, and then I think the insurance changed, and it was 15%, but it still could add up to quite a bit of money. So through a year's time, our portion out of pocket for supplies and hospital stays, and because she had a lot of blockages through the years, and we'd end up in emergency room and then in hospital for 2 or 3 days. So it wasn't uncommon to, in addition to the cost of the insurance, that we had anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000 a year in additional expense for supplies or copays on doctor's visits and prescriptions and supplies.
All related to.
Yeah. Now, once we got it on Medicare, we elected to keep our health insurance. So we had the same health insurance that we had prior to going on Medicare. We had with CalPET. So and of course our cost for insurance went up because you had to pay for Medicare B. And we had A and B, plus we had our secondary insurance. We didn't have to, or we didn't take out the Medicare prescription plan because we had the medical insurance, and that basically covered that. So the way it worked once we did that was Medicare would pay what they paid, and then the insurance would typically pick up the remainder. So with supplies, it didn't cost us anything out of pocket. So, but the problem with that was the supply companies, we ended up going with mail order because that's where they were kind of forcing you to go. And you had to go to someone that was Medicare approved. Well, they wanted to send you a 90-day supply, and they wanted to do it every 90 days, and they wanted to send you the amount that Medicare approved to send. Well, that wasn't the amount that you needed.
Necessarily. And in our case, it
almost
wasn't.
Invariably,
Yeah.
It was not the amount you actually needed.
It was more than what Mom was needing.
Yeah, and since she didn't get near the life that some people would get. A lot of people that we knew would get a week.
Yeah.
Typically, they would get a week, even though they had an ileostomy, they would get a week's wear out of an appliance change book. And Anna never got 7 days. She might have got 5 or even 6, but they were very rare occasions. Mm-hmm. So we would get email or a phone call, and they're telling us it's time to order supplies, it's time to order supplies. And yet, when you got on the phone to order supplies, they wanted you to tell them that you only had
2 weeks.
A week or 2 weeks of supplies left. Well, that might be true for something, but it wouldn't be true for the whole gamut of supplies that we had. So it was a real pain. And really what they wanted to do is just automatically ship you supplies every 90 days.
Yeah.
And do this certain amount.
Regardless
and
of
then,
how it was.
Regardless of the truth. They really, no matter what they said, they really were not interested in how many supplies you had on hand.
Yeah, it wasn't customizable.
And then the number, she used a 2-piece appliance, so a box of wafers had 10 wafers in it. Mm-hmm. But a box of bags had 20 bags in it. So you couldn't order, if you wanted to order 3 boxes of wafers for 30 wafers, and I'm just giving you some numbers. Well, you couldn't get 30 bags.
Yeah.
You had to get 40 or you had to get 20. Yeah. So it was just the way the medical industry works is it messes with Medicare and it messes with the patient. Yeah. There's no good balance. No. And so over time, she ended up with extra stuff.
Well, and this is a different experience for a lot of people who don't have Medicare, because a lot of times you may end up with not enough supplies.
Well, and I can't speak for those that have Medicare Advantage. I don't know how that works. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
But I doubt if they had as good a coverage as we did
Mm-hmm.
with Medicare A and B plus insurance.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons to that too, which if you're interested, I can make a video about explaining that from my experience in work and personally. So let me know if that's something you're interested in learning more about. But yeah, so if you have a commercial plan, and I'm going to assume probably too with Medicaid, if you had Medicaid only, I hear a lot of people that run into the issue of they're not receiving enough supplies and they can't get more because it's not been the allotted time to. But anyways, so there's a lot of different things that can happen and things like that. But you can see, we'll grab the box, and Dad, I want you to share with us, kind of explain, because I'm not sure if this is one box in the delivery, or there's multiple, things like that. So let's get the box so we can show him, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, the box that she's opening is not a box that we received from a supplier. It's the box that I actually bought from Walmart.
To put all of it in. Well, it'll be interesting because we're going to unbox it. We're going to go through the products, and this was, now tell me, are the products that we're going to look through, was that all in one box, or that been multiple boxes combined into this one?
No, that would have been more than one shipment. The shipment we got was not that large of a box.
Okay. And this is the supplies that we're about to show, were they all in one shipment?
Not necessarily.
Okay. So it's kind of hodgepodge what we're showing.
And yeah, its life is not simple and straightforward.
Yeah. See, okay.
For example, Ina's father had an ileostomy. And he didn't have it till he was later in life, when he was in his 70s, when he had surgery and had an ileostomy. He had a reconnection before that.
Yes, and Grandpa also had FAP, just like Mom and me.
Yeah. So when he passed away, Ina inherited all of his supplies. Well, he didn't get his stuff through Medicare. He got it through the VA.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a whole other issue on supply.
Yeah.
They don't bother to ask you what you need. They just ship what they think you need, what they want to ship you.
Yeah.
So the powder that she used is her dad's powder.
Oh, okay.
It lasted 30 years.
Oh my gosh, wow.
Because they just shipped powder every time they made a shipment.
Well, and when I had my reversal, then Mom used the products that I had,
right?
That she wanted to keep.
So life is not straightforward. It's real messy. It's a bunch of compromises, and it doesn't work the way that you think it should.
And that's honestly that goes for all of life, doesn't it?
Yes. Now, and don't get me wrong. As a family, as a family of three, a husband that worked and a wife that had chronic illness and really couldn't work, but she tried to keep busy and do things, and a daughter that was growing up, and then after the fourth grade, she had either an ileostomy or she had a straight pull through and they both gave her problems. And she had chronic health problems. And of course, I just kept working.
And thank goodness we were fortunate you were able to do that.
Yes, but as a family, we were so blessed in that we were able to balance our work, our family, our life, our commitments, our medical costs, our frequent visits to the ER, our hospital stays, our surgeries, and get through it and come out the other side with a halfway decent attitude and still have some kind of enjoyment for life.
And not, let's say that does not mean that it was not an absolute struggle financially, emotionally, physically. By all means, it was not an easy road, but we were right. We managed to get through it together, and
I've been blessed.
we've all been blessed. All three of us
Yes.
been very blessed.
So the box.
All right. So I'm gonna get the box so that we can just show
Now
it.
remember, this is bigger than the box that it would come shipped.
Well, and let's hold it up, Daddy. Let's hold it up so we can quite see exactly how big. And again, this is not all one shipment. It's a hodgepodge of it, but that's any guess about how much this would have lasted, Mom? Do you think?
This would have probably, if it was in the right proportions, it would have probably lasted a year.
Wow. Okay.
But, Medicare, well, not Medicare, but
Just insurance.
it's the way that the supply houses work the rules to their benefit and to make money, basically, is what I'm thinking. Because it wasn't necessarily to our benefit. We wanted to have somewhat of a cushion, but we didn't need a gears cushion.
Oh, I got it. Okay, so we're gonna put this over there and we'll pull out. Oh my goodness. Can we kind of tip this? I mean, it is jam-packed. Yeah, you can see that. It is jam-packed of supplies.
And
Okay.
I don't know if it's got some of the stuff. It may not have some of the stuff.
So this is a box of wafers. It's Convatec. This is the paper adhesive that Dad was talking about. This one's the SureFit Natura from Convatec, like I said, and it's a convexit because Mom's was quite flush, so it needed to be a convex to kind of push it out.
Right, and remember that we talked about that the back side of this on the wafer is convex. Well, she added this Ekin ring, or half of the Ekin ring, so it made it even a little bit area around the stoma even more convex. And the box has 10, so that would be basically, if things work the way they should have worked, and so you're planning on a 3-day lifetime. So 3 boxes would be 90 days. So she wouldn't need 3 boxes. But the box of bags.
These are the ones that Mama chose.
Yeah.
This is also Convatec. I think all of her supplies are Convatec, aren't they?
Well, the appliances.
The appliances. But it's the 2-piece, like Dad was saying. And Mom and I both, I think we both tried the Velcro that they had, and we both decided that we liked the clamps better. Some people really like the Velcro one fastener, and it works well for them.
And there's the clamp.
See, and I think Mom and I, we kind of like
And
these
each
old
box,
tiny
I think,
ones.
has 2 clamps in it.
Okay.
At least one, but
And we talked before in our last
yeah,
video
there's
that
2 clamps in a box.
Mom used 2 clamps on each bag each time. I used just one, but Mom had an experience at some point where
She had multiple
ones that
where a clamp would come loose.
And that may have be attributed to also Mom had arthritis, so that may have made it.
Years.
Well, that may have made it harder though too to be able to. So the extra 2 made it even more secure for Mom.
You would have this stuck
Mm-hmm.
on your wafer, and it would hang down, and then you would take this,
I'll hold it for you.
and you would.
This is how Mom did it because she did one higher up and one lower.
And then you would close it.
Yeah.
And then she'd put another one on, so she'd have 2.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she always complained that with her stoma placement, and that this would hang down, and it would hurt when she sat down.
Because it is a hard plastic.
And so we ended up the last few years. She bought like boxer type shorts, of that would help kind of hold everything better and didn't fall off the bottom of her panties.
Right.
So she got where she didn't wear
Well,
normal type girl panties very often. She'd wear these boxer things with the longer legs.
Yeah, and what Mom did is she kept it flat like this, whereas what I did is I folded mine. So here, so what I did is I folded mine so it was inside folded in my underwear, and then I would have the end hanging out over my underwear so that it would help hold it in place. Because I didn't like it. It would have been hanging way too low on me. But that's how I did it. And then I just kind of made sure that I might need to empty it a little bit more frequent or things. But it worked well for me. And I actually have a video that we talk about how Mom and I, how we emptied our ostomy bags, because Mom did it different than I did, and how we cleaned the ends of it. So you can check that out too for a further explanation about how we did that part of it.
And I very occasionally, very infrequently, had some kind of involvement in that portion of their.
You did or you didn't?
Well, occasionally I would have to help her empty it, but not very often. This is a box of the Brava strips. It's made by Coloplast, and we tried.
I'm not going to open these up all the way, but you can see that this is what it looks like. And so,
yeah, and the Coloplast wafers and bags and whatnot, Ina would get samples and we would try them, but something to do with that and her skin type, she never had a good life.
And that's one thing you can always do. You can call the ostomy supply companies, the manufacturers, and say, I'd like to sample XYZ, and they'll send you a sample for free.
So you would take this, I take one of these, and I would place it over, so it would be like so, and I'd place one on the inside and one on the outside. And it's big enough that it would attach to her skin up above and below and on the outside. And it stuck very well.
And how many do you think are in there? There's quite a few in here.
20. There's actually 20. I thought there was 10, but there's 20.
It'd be for 10 wafers using 2.
If you use 2.
Yeah. And see, Mom also dated when she received these things. She'd write on the box when they were received. And you can see these, like Dad was saying, they lasted. So these were 2023 that Mom.
Okay, here is Unisolve. Remember, I talked about taking the appliance off of your stomach with Unisolve, and these comes like a little towelette. There's 2 there, and you tear one, and you use it as a solvent to get the appliance to the adhesive turn loose. And even with using that, sometimes she actually tore her skin.
And Mom had a very thin skin, literally, especially in her older years.
Right.
These ones, this box has 50 of them, and it is made by Smith and Nephew, which, I mean, when you guys ordered supplies, they just had what they had on formulary.
She would tell them how many she wanted, and
yeah.
And they got to the point where they had a certain number they wanted to send her. I don't know exactly how that happened, but
they'll have what's on formulary with your insurance and gives you the options that you have.
Now, then after she cleaned her around her stoma and washed it with her ivory soap and dried it and whatnot, she could use some skin prep.
Mm-hmm.
This is a barrier wipe.
These are great. This one is Sure Prep by Medline, and it's a box of 50. But this was very helpful because it helped reduce the stinging of things, and I remember I really liked these.
And this is a no sting barrier from Safe and Simple. Yeah. It's got 25. It's a bigger packet, though, I think.
Yeah, and the nice thing is with these, it has no alcohol or lotion, so it isn't going to impede the adhesiveness of the wafer, and it doesn't add to the stinginess that alcohol does. And again, these are towelettes. Both of these are just little towelettes.
Okay. Here is the Econ Cohesive Seal. I got where she puts the date on them.
Yeah.
This one was April of 2024. And I think, I don't know what date she was using, probably 21 or who knows.
This is the Econ Cell. And like I said, it's moldable with just the heat of your hands.
Mm-hmm. And I would typically use half. I would just tear it in half, leave the other half in this. It's got a little plastic
Cover on
each side of it.
Oh, so it doesn't dry out.
Yeah. So and then I would put this half in a baggie.
Oh, a Ziploc baggie.
And then 3 or 4 days later I'd use the other half.
And this one's by Convatec, the Econ Cohesive. And this is, so you notice it says small. So
right, they're talking about the opening size and probably the diameter of the whole thing.
Because stoma sizes vary from person to person, and in now is it in every wafer box that it has the measuring tool?
No.
Okay, but you can get a measuring tool. It's just kind of it's not paper.
It's kind of like a ring sizer.
Yes, and it tells you can put it over your stoma so you can know what size, and that helps you to know what wafer size you need to order. And there's also they also provide, or you can get ostomy scissors, wafer scissors to trim the inside of the wafer when needed. I remember, I think you had to do that for me some, but you can trim this part here with the scissors if it needs to be a larger opening. And that's important too, because you don't want too small size of the wafer ring, because it can cut the stoma. The stoma itself doesn't have nerve endings. You can feel pressure. It can bleed though, and it can bleed quite a bit. But it's something that's definitely want to pay attention to. Okay, so here's another. Must be the rolling prep that you're talking about.
Yeah, this is Coloplast. It's a skin prep thing.
Another option instead of the towelettes. And I'm gonna open it. Oh, I think it's been used, but see, it's just the roller, and you would actually squeeze it,
yes.
Or it's upside down. You can do that. So then, okay, so the powder. This one's by Hollister. It's Adapt Stoma powder. Is this Grandpa's?
No,
okay.
I don't think so. Because typically his had a prescription thing from the VA on it.
Now, these work just fine, but you can see there's actually an expiration date on here, and this one is from 2013. You can see, but they actually worked fine for us still. It didn't cause mom issues or me issues.
Yeah, and speaking of expiration dates, the expiration date on most medical things is,
in your experience?
No, this is from medical experts talking about it.
Okay,
not from me.
that you have
read. They
okay.
are established because they tested.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever we're talking about. In this case, we're talking about this powder.
Mm-hmm.
They tested that powder for the qualities they wanted to establish a lifetime. Well, and they established a lifetime, and that's what they put on there. It didn't have a longer lifetime because they didn't bother to test for a longer lifetime.
Okay, so it's based on just what they tested, for the length they tested.
Right, and the same thing is true for pills. The expiration date is established because that's where they stopped testing. Not that it necessarily would be bad a year later.
They
don't know sure. Because they didn't test.
They don't. Yeah. Okay. So
that's what I have heard from medical experts.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. That's it. And it's an important thing to keep in mind too when we're looking at studies and research and things. Is
Right.
what was the length tested for?
Yeah. So, and we talked earlier about that Ina used the powder from her dad. Well, he passed away in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So, in some of his supplies was probably, obviously in the 90s.
Yeah.
And she used them. She still had some.
And
so
obviously she
they were
had
20,
some,
25 years old.
and some obviously, because depending too, like where you grab from what pile, I'm sure we had an experience of different dates on things.
Mm-hmm. And we got to the point where as she got things in, she tried to put dates on them. This is June 23.
And to point out here too,
So she tried to use them by date.
Mm-hmm. And you can see here too, this talks about the stoma size, the diameter of the wafer measurements too.
Right. And this one is dated September 22.
Yeah. And it's just another bag of bags, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is what we did, is our experiences with it. It is not that we're giving anybody medical advice or recommendations on what to do. We're just sharing what we did and our experiences with it.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. What worked for us, what didn't work for us, and everybody's different. Their body's different, and their processes are different. And
what Ina did, and her beliefs and her practices and what worked for her was not necessarily what the ET nurses believed or what they recommended. Their experience was different, and their experience mainly is people in the hospital. Well, when you're out of the hospital and you've got an active lifestyle, but you've got an ileostomy,
and Mom had a very active lifestyle,
then it's going to be a different ballgame.
Yeah, and it's and for I have also another video. If you're interested, it's with Kevin Myers, and he is showing you during his own ileostomy change how he does it, the products that he uses. So that can be another good resource for information and ideas. And it doesn't ever hurt to go to your ET nurse at your local hospital, because Mom did that a lot. If she was having going into one of those cycles where it was frequent changes, she would go to them and they would try to troubleshoot and brainstorm. And there were things that worked and things that didn't.
You can actually have a sore of some type, maybe like a burn under your wafer, around your stoma, that you need to go see the ET nurses or to your GI doctor to
evaluate and treat.
And then they might prescribe some medicine or some different treatment to alleviate that.
Absolutely.
And the powder was one of the good things if you did have put powder on that area.
That's what they told Mom to do.
Right. I did not realize how many supplies she had, because we had a cabinet that we stored them in the bathroom, off of our bedroom. And that's where most of them were. Well, she ran out of storage because in the craft room, which is the bedroom that Jennifer slept in at one time when she was at home, she had more supplies.
Well, I remember even, when Mom was alive, I remember her having to donate. She didn't keep these supplies like from the 90s and just use them all up until they weren't there. She did donate periodically supplies to, so it wasn't.
And let me emphasize, if it had been possible, if she had found it feasible and possible, she would have had a limited number of extra supplies.
Yeah.
It's just that it was such a hassle to deal with these supply companies on a regular basis, and they're hounding you that you need to reorder. That, eventually she just gave up.
Yeah.
It just was, her health was not great, and she didn't enjoy fighting with them.
No, when Mama was younger, she would give a fight. She'd give a fight with medical billing offices and the insurance to keep things.
And supply houses.
Oh yeah, but over time, and with chronic illness, regardless of your age, there's things that it's just not worth it, right? It's because you don't have the energy. You have to think of how many spoons you have. And Mom got to the point where she didn't have enough spoons for it.
Right. And I tried to order for her online a couple of times, but the supply houses have they think they know better.
Well,
no matter what it is, they think they know better. And they might in some cases, but they would arbitrarily just make decisions. So when you got your shipment in, it might not be what you ordered.
Oh.
And the quantities might not be what you ordered.
Yeah. And to be fair to supply companies and things, they also have their hands tied in different ways than what the patient does.
But it's a compromise.
It's a compromise because people's hands are tied by various regulations and things like that. And so it's important to keep that in mind too, especially when you're feeling frustrated because you don't have enough supplies or you have too many. Honestly, probably a lot of the people that are working with the supply companies, they're probably frustrated too because there's a lot of them that they want to be able to do what they can for you, what you're needing, and they're not always allowed.
Yeah, I would encourage those of you that are chronically short of supplies through whatever your situation is that creates that problem. There's also people like my wife that had too many supplies, and it was a problem for her. Well, if you make an effort, you can find some resources through your local ostomy support group, through your ET nurses, through your GI doctors, maybe through a pharmacy. You can, maybe through media.
Well, and I'm going to give you a link to some different resources to help with getting donated supplies because that is a real issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, if we had known people, we would have given supplies directly.
Yeah.
But we didn't know anybody that needed anything. So the other box that I had, I just gave
to the local hospital.
To the ET office at the hospital, and there was they had a bunch of sacks and small boxes and whatnot stacked around. People had given, and then I had this huge box.
And we're going to donate this huge box again. This is huge box.
And they were they told me that for whatever reason that they were using Hollister now. Oh. But when Anna had surgery and they trained us, they were using Convatec. So I don't know why and I'm not trying to say anything bad about Hollister.
No, again, products work different for different people. So, and Mom and I remember we'd have to kind of change some different things. Obviously it's a hodgepodge of some different companies.
Yeah, there was a Hollister in
the stoma
right.
powder.
The Brava strip, I think, was a different brand, maybe.
And the Talus that we use, they're not even Hollister or Convatec. They're different companies.
Yeah, the Brava strip is Coloplast.
Oh, yeah, that's another one.
So there's at least 3 major companies.
Yeah. And I'll give links to those also in the description to the major manufacturer companies. And again, remember, you can always call them and say that you, sometimes you can actually call them too and say, hey, I'm having this issue. Do you have a product that you think might be helpful for that? And they'll send you a sample to try it out. Again, you can always go to your ET nurses at your local hospital. And they can help also with trying to figure out some different things that can help. They are very knowledgeable. They're very, ET nurses are incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And most of the big companies, Hollister, Convatec, Coloplast, if you live in a populated area, they will have a representative.
Oh, that you can come.
That works with the local ET nurses and the ostomy support groups.
Yes.
And they know they know these people, and they
Mhm.
will come and speak and give you samples. And so
That's
if
right.
you make the effort to kind of involve yourself in a local support system, you'll find there's a whole bunch of people out there that you didn't realize existed.
Hmm.
Most of
Which
them are
is
very nice people, very willing to help you, and you'll find a lot more resources are actually available than you ever thought.
And that's I'm going to put a link there also to the United Ostomy Associations of America. Every state has multiple support groups, and I do remember we would go to the support groups. In the old days, it was UOA, United Ostomy Association, and then it uh, evolved into the OAA. But we would have representatives from the ostomy manufacturer companies, and it was not just a great resource for ostomy supplies, but also emotional support and connection. And so you didn't feel quite alone. An interesting fact, so I've been working with the Oklahoma chapter with NORD, and I reached out to one of the medical supply companies, and I asked them, because we were on a project, how many ostomates in Oklahoma do you serve? And it was 17,500 in Oklahoma alone from one medical supply company. So there are tons of ostomates out, not just in the US, not just Oklahoma, in the world. And with the internet, the availability of that has expanded an incredible amount. The resources of all kinds that people can receive and give. So, and I know as an ostomate myself, I felt extremely alone. And so I encourage you, if you haven't reached out to or found some of these resources, look in the description. I'm going to link some different things. Check it out, and it's good. So I encourage you to reach out and utilize that support system that is available much more now than what it used to be, even because it can be life changing. It can be life changing. I had to learn to cultivate a support system, and actually then I had to learn to use it. And I can't tell you how beneficial it has been, because I remember being very alone, very isolated, very depressed from it all as a child. And that wasn't necessarily true, that I was as isolated as I felt. But I can tell you that it's a much bigger world now than what it used to be.
And I think what most of us find out after we get involved, because most people are not involved in ostomies whatsoever. They know nothing about it. They don't understand anything. They're very prejudiced. They're very ignorant.
There's a lot of negative stigma
And
still,
they're very
unfortunately.
biased with no knowledge.
Yeah.
You have the same thing with people that have cataracts.
Mhm.
I personally know some people that say they'd rather die than have cataract surgery. And they'd rather go blind than have cataract surgery. You got to be kidding me! But that's
their reality.
people.
Yeah, and and to be fair, everybody's tolerance level for things, it varies, right? So, and I can speak from my personal experience. I am so terrified of NG tubes being inserted while I'm awake because of the trauma experience from that I have not had a food blockage since my reversal that I have been willing to go to the hospital for. I on the flip side, I'm like, at this point, I am more willing to risk rupture my intestine and possible death than go to the hospital. So everybody's different. It doesn't make sense to everybody, but each person's experience and perception is different. So it's good to keep that in mind too.
and your mom, for whatever reason, and I can't tell you the number of times that she had an NG tube put in.
Oh my gosh, I know. And
she didn't like them,
no.
But I've never known her to put up
a real fight about it.
No.
Not like I would.
and typically with her, she'd get an NG tube in, and the second day or third day, she'd have a massive headache. They gave her headaches, and that was one of her. And of course, you have a sore throat. And
Well, and just the pain. There's just pain.
It's a lot of pain.
It is. And that's always one thing that I always admire. Mom's my role model. She is my hero.
She's a tough gal, I tell you.
Oh my gosh. And if you want to learn about just how tough she was up to her last breath, check out another video where I detail the last 2 weeks of Mom's life and what it was like, and where she showed her true tough colors all the way through.
And yeah, we talk about her that way. The biggest comment that we heard after she passed from people that knew her,
and even
strength.
Well, yes, yeah. But even while she was still alive,
is Ina is so kind and sweet.
She was.
That's what most people said.
Yeah.
And if people had some other different opinion, they didn't share it with me.
No. But yeah, Mom radiated sweetness and kindness. Now, did she have an anger streak in there? A irritating streak at times? Yeah. Could she stand her ground and not be so sweet? Sure. But overall, she radiated sweetness. Gal. And extremely strong. But so if you have questions, if you have information to add, leave it below. If there's something else that you want to learn about, you want another video, like I said, about like insurance insights that I have learned from experience and from work, let me know. We're happy to do some more. If you got some questions for Dad, leave it below. Dad's been pretty good about doing these things with me, so I'm sure he would put up with it again.
Only for you, sweetie pie.
Well, anything else you have to add, Dad?
Well, I think you hit. I think if you're a new person with the ostomy of some sort, and we really only talked about ileostomies,
because that was our experience.
That's there's several different kinds of ostomies.
And speaking of which, I have a video about that.
Yeah. So, but there is a lot of prejudice and misunderstanding and ignorance just in the general population. But on top of that, in the medical population, there's a lot of unknowns for medical people. Mm-hmm. And you may have to search to find the right fit for you and your situation. But like Jenny has said, and Ina and I found out, there's a lot of people out there. Most of our experiences have been real positive, mm-hmm. where we made connections. And I would encourage you to, reach out and, like Jenny said, make your own support group. It's available if you make the effort, and you'll find some lifelong friends there if you make the effort.
And it can be really hard to reach out and do that, especially if you're feeling self-conscious and you're internalizing that stigma from society. And unfortunately, as chronic illness patients, we know we have to advocate. We have to advocate for ourselves, and we have to educate a lot of people, and that's not any different for any type of ostomate. But some of the resources that I'm going to list below will help you arm yourself. And I can tell you, as I learned to advocate, Mom taught me how to advocate for myself, and over time I gained the confidence. And by golly, did I need it sometimes. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes, the more confidence you have. And I know it can be very difficult to reach out and do things like that when we're so self-conscious. But I can tell you from my personal experience, it will get better with that the more that you do it, as uncomfortable as it can be. So please don't hesitate to reach out. You're always welcome to reach out to me too. And that's what this is. That's what Life's All About, is about empowerment and making a change, because I'm determined to get that NORD FAP fund fully funded for research, because I want to go from simply delaying surgery for FAP, whether it's an ostomy or a reconnection, to let's prevent the need for surgery to begin with.
Yeah, and kind of off the subject, but related.
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading these articles where they're talking about doing blood tests for colon cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that sounds real great and real straightforward, but it's really not that way.
No, there's so much.
And I'm not talking from a medical perspective.
Yeah.
Perspective. I'm talking about from a patient perspective, because in my case, I don't have FAP,
right,
but I do have polyps.
Yeah.
And I get scopes every 5 years, and they remove polyps. So if I just depended on a blood test to say, well, you don't have colon cancer, you have nothing to worry about. Yeah, but I could have a big old polyp that would require me to have a resection.
Right.
And how would I know if I didn't do a scope? Right. So I'm not saying that the blood test is bad, but you need to be aware.
Yeah, it's, and a blood test can be very helpful for someone who is unwilling to go under a scope, because something is better than nothing. But by all means, the best way to prevent colon cancer is going to have a scope, to have a colonoscopy. And sure, is the prep not fun? No. But they do have a lot of different options available now. And they are making all kinds of medical advancement in different ways to screen. But see, that's the thing too, right? Is that some of these tests are screening, whereas a scope is surveillance.
Yeah,
there's a difference.
And you think about it. If you get a blood test that says you have cancer, well, if you'd done scopes, you might never had cancer.
Right.
Because you got rid of the cause or the trigger, which in most cases is a polyp.
Yeah.
If you're talking about colon cancer, you could have gotten rid of that. Now, if you have FAP, it's not.
Well, if FAP, I don't think they would recommend even the blood test, because it is such a prevalence. It's different than just regular colon cancer or colorectal. Yeah. Yeah. But and we say these things not with judgment, but with the urgency of preventive measures for people that may not be aware or maybe having second thoughts, because that's what we're about. We don't want people to go through the experiences that Mom and I had. We don't. That's what Life of Polyp is all about.
Well, and we want to encourage you to not just take our word for something.
No.
You need to do your research. You need to do due diligence. You need second opinions. Don't just go for the first snake oil salesman type thing. Yeah. Find out, do your homework, because it's your life that's at risk.
Yes. And on lifeofpolyp.com, I have tons of resources. So specifically for in regards to cancer, that helps with the education aspect too. There's One Cancer Place, and that's for all cancers. There is Colontown for colorectal cancers that help you learn about cancer, your options, your treatment, your prevention if you are at risk of it, for like for FAP or Lynch syndrome, things like that, different hereditary colon cancer syndromes. But absolutely. And one of my greatest resources that I absolutely love and discovered is nccn.org. It's the National Comprehensive Cancer Network. And they have the most world-recognized guidelines for cancer surveillance. And you can create a free account. They have patient guides and they have physician guides. And they update the guidelines every year. I recommend making the free account so that you can receive the physician guidelines. And you can use those as a tool to not only educate yourself, but advocate for you with your doctors. And they have ones for FAP. And it's very detailed. It's wonderful. They have a wonderful, wonderful education resource, an advocacy tool.
Yeah, I was seeing news articles just recently that Gen X and millennial generations are having a pretty significant increase in occurrence of cancer.
Yeah.
I don't know what types. I didn't find out. Yeah. I'm not in that area. Didn't spend the time. Yeah. But
it's a real thing.
It is.
It's becoming earlier and earlier.
Yeah. We're making great strides in the medical field about cancer, and I have hopes that at some point they can do genetic modifications that would
the gene therapy
that would maybe eliminate the FAP type of
Yeah.
cancer. But there's a ton of other cancers, and it looks like we're in a situation where there's new ones developing. There's new generations that are having new and different problems, so
Yes.
have to be aware.
Absolutely. And that might be something that, let me know if you would like a video on some of the different things with FAP that we've learned over time. It's definitely, because there's mosaic. I've learned in some of my biomarker classes that I took with One Cancer Place about some different things like how someone can have phenotype, the appearance, the physical appearance type things, characteristics of FAP, but genetically they don't test for it, but it could even actually just be that the protein is being expressed or not expressed. And there's not a test for that right now on FAP, like there is some other cancers, other things that happen. But if you'd like more information about that, let me know, because we can do a video about that too, of the different things that I've learned. But by all means, reach out, and you got this, okay? And we're here to help.
And well, hopefully we haven't been too boring, and that we've given you some decent information, maybe some things that you didn't know before that will help you with your life. That is our hope.
It is.
Good.
And it was Mom's hope too. And you know what, Dad, you've been helping me a lot keeping Mom's legacy going with all this. So, like you said, you guys have a good day. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Life's a Polyp blog and shop, and subscribe and like, and I'll talk to you soon.